Hi friends, welcome back for another lesson. This is week 11, day 1. For today's lesson, you are going to need your EL workbook, your thinking cap, and your listening ears, and a pencil or something to write with. If you don't have these materials ready, just press pause, then press play when you're ready. Okay, let's get started with a little game. We've played this game before. I spy with my little eye. I'm going to give you a clue, and then you are going to see if you can guess which object on the screen I spy. Let's see. I spy with my little eye an object in the sky that goes through phases. And this particular picture on the screen shows the middle phase. What do I spy? A full moon. Good job. Let's see. I spy with my little eye something in the sky that is made up of gases, and it is so bright it hurts to look at it. What do I spy? The sun. Very good. Okay, this one's pretty easy. It's the only one left. I spy with my little eye something in the sky that you call home. What do I spy? Yep, the earth. That's where you live. Okay, good. That was pretty easy, huh? Now that we've played a little game and got our brain thinking about things in the sky, let's look at our learning target for today. This target is a continuation of a target that we worked on last week in week 10. Our target says, I can use a model poem to plan my own poem. Let's read that again. I can use a model poem to plan my own poem. We're going to be looking at that same model poem that we looked at last week to help us plan our poem. Now, our poem looks a little different this week, and that's because I'm showing you the whole poem today. Before, I was cutting the poem off right here, and I was just showing you the 3 main verses. But because we're getting close to the end of our poem and the end of planning our poem, it's time for us to also look at the closing. The closing is what closes the end of the poem. Right here at the bottom, we can see the closing. Point to the closing for me. That's right, it's at the very bottom. Our arrows now show us that we have verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, and verse 4, or verse 1, 2, 3, and the closing. Let's read this whole poem together, and then we'll zoom in on looking at verse 3 and the closing. We've read this a few times, so I want to hear you reading it with me. It is evening. The thin silver moon is above the hill. The moon sees delicious dinner on the kitchen table. It is midnight. The big round moon is high in the sky. The moon sees a curious raccoon looking for food. It is twilight. The gibbous moon sinks below the horizon. The moon sees peaceful children dreaming in bed. The moon sets and day begins. Good job reading with me. Now, today we are going to focus in on verse 3 and our closing. So I want us to reread just this part, and I'm actually going to put my face over the top 2 verses so that we can really focus on verse 3 and our closing. It is twilight. The gibbous moon sinks below the horizon. The moon sees peaceful children dreaming in bed. The moon sets and day begins. Good job. Now we're going to use this verse 3 and this closing to help us plan for our verse 3 and our closing. Now to do this, you're going to need to get out your planner. So get out that EL workbook. I'm going to get mine too. And I want you to go to page 78. Let's go to page 78. On page 78, you're going to see the planner that we have been working with during our last few lessons. Now on my planner, it's not all filled out, but on yours, you'll have verse 1 and verse 2 filled out. And today we're going to work on verse 3. Have your planner and set it out right in front of you with your pencil ready to write. Press pause if you haven't found it yet. Then press play when you're ready. Okay, now I have zoomed in on that verse 3. Take your finger and touch verse 3 in your workbook so that you can stay with me. Now for us to fill out that verse 3 chart, we're going to need our poem. So let me put our poem on the screen, and I'll make myself a little bit smaller. But because we are focusing on this verse, I'm going to cover up the first 2. Let's take a look at our planner and see if we can answer those questions. What time is it? It is twilight. The gibbous moon sinks below the horizon. What time is it? It is twilight. That's right. Our poem started at evening and then midnight and now twilight. So let's add twilight to our planner. I'll add it to mine too. Our next question says, what does the moon look like? What does the moon look like? It is twilight. The gibbous moon sinks below the horizon. Sometimes it helps if I close my eyes when I'm listening to someone read to me. The gibbous moon sinks below the horizon. What does that moon look like? That's right. There's an adjective in this sentence that's telling me what the moon looks like by describing it. Gibbous. That's right. Let's add gibbous to our chart. It's one of the phases of the moon. Gibbous. Twilight and gibbous. Okay, let's look at the next one. The next one says, what is the moon doing? What is the moon doing? Let's read it. It is twilight. The gibbous moon sinks below the horizon. What is it doing? It is... That's right. It is sinking below the horizon. Our poem says it right here in verse 3. So on that line, you're going to add sinks below the horizon. Sinks below the horizon. You may have to go all the way out here to finish that little phrase. Sinks below the horizon. Let's look at the next one. What does the moon see? What does the moon see? Now we know the moon doesn't really have eyes, but if the moon was to look down in this verse, the moon sees peaceful children dreaming in bed. What does the moon see? That's right. Peaceful children dreaming in bed. And we know the moon doesn't have eyes, but we can put it in our poem to help our reader really see that picture in their mind. That's a good skill for readers and writers. Let's add peaceful children dreaming in bed to our last box of verse 3. Peaceful children dreaming in bed. Peaceful children dreaming in bed. You can use this space underneath the box or beside the box to finish your phrase. Pause the video if you need more time to write that phrase. Okay, so it looks like on our planner, we have completed that verse 3 box. So now we're going to hop down to the closing. Put your finger on the closing. I see the blend cool to help me find where I am. Closing. Now the closing of the poem, that is where the poet or the author or writer helps us end the poem with one last phrase. Our poem has a closing that says, "The moon sets and day begins." So what's cool about this poem is that it starts in the evening and it goes all the way through the night until the moon sets and the sun comes out. Day begins. The moon sets and day begins. Now your closing won't have the moon setting because your poem is about the sun. So your closing will be a little different. But let's add this closing into our planner so that it can help us later. The moon sets. That is what our closing is mostly about. The moon setting. Add the moon sets to your closing on page 78. The moon sets. You have this big long box to write that phrase. Again, adding this into our planner is going to make planning your poem that much easier. The moon sets. The moon sets. If you need more time to write that phrase, just pause the video and take your time. Okay, writers, we now have verse 3 and our closing planned out. We analyzed this poem very closely, and we're going to use this model poem to help us plan our own poem. Excuse me. To do this, you are going to need to turn in your workbook to page 82. Let's see, 82, just a few more pages over. Okay. It looks like this, 82, and you can see it, you can see it on my screen. This page focuses on verse 3. So you should see verse 3 at the top of your page. 82. We are going to start planning verse 3 of our own poems. Then we will start writing our first poem draft. So let's take a look at page 82. you can see that the first box says, what time is it? What time is it? Now, we could say afternoon, late afternoon, late midday, or twilight. Any of those words would be appropriate for verse 3 of your poem. I'm going to choose the word twilight, and I'll know how to spell it because I can go back to page 78 and I can copy that word twilight. What time is it? Twilight. Twilight is right in between day and night. So that would make sense for verse 3 of our poem. Our next box says, what does the sun look like? What does the sun look like? You can either use your sky notebook and find your twilight entry, or you can paint a picture in your mind of what twilight looks like during the day. What's happening? What is the sun doing? Where is the sun in the sky at the end of the day? What colors do you see? Use all those good adjectives. Remember, in our planner, we had good adjectives like gibbous, that described the moon, right? And peaceful, which described the children. So think about what adjectives you can put to describe the sun. I know you're still thinking and writing, but I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the rest of this page so that you can get started on your own. The next box says, what is the sun doing? So at the end of the day, what is the sun doing? What does the sun see? If the sun is looking down at twilight, what does the sun see? We're not waking up, but it's not quite time for us to get in our beds yet. What does the sun see us doing? Once you've completed your chart for verse 3, you're going to sketch what that looks like, what twilight looks like. Then you're going to write your closing. Now, you might get stuck here and think, I don't know how to write a closing, but that's why you have your planner that we did together on page 78. So you are here, but you can go back to page 78 and you can look at that closing from the poem that we just did to help you write yours. Remember, it said the moon sets, and you don't have the moon in your poem, but you do have the what? The sun. So you can write the sun sets and finish that closing. Now, I'm going to let you decide. You can either pause the video right here and you can work on your verse 3 planner. Or you can continue to watch and I'll work with you on writing your draft. I'll walk you through what that looks like. Then you can go back and do the planner and then the draft. So if you'd like time to work on your planner, just press pause and I'll see you in a minute. If you are choosing to continue to watch, then let's go ahead and skip forward to our first draft and then you can come back and finish this. Writing your first draft. This is so exciting. I wish I had fireworks to give you because you have finished all of your verse planners. You did verse 1, verse 2, verse 3. You're closing. What an accomplishment. And now you're going to take all of those little tidbits and put them into a poem. You will use your verse planner pages to help you write your first draft. You can choose to write your draft on the notes pages, which are in the very back of your EL workbook. I'll show you. It's in the very, very back. It says notes. Or if you don't want to write it there, you can use writing paper. You can use lined paper. Any of those will work. So let's see. How are we going to do this? Well, it says we're going to use our verse planner. So we need to find verse 1 planner, which is on page 80. So right now you're on verse 3, but you're going to have to go back to verse 1. You're going to take all of those words and you're going to use them to write the first verse of your poem. Remember, You're not going to write just the words. You're going to give me full sentences. For example, on page 80, I wrote, for what time is it? Morning. So my poem will start like this. It is morning, period. My next box, what does the sun look like? I put big and orange. So my next sentence will say, the sun is big and orange. My next set says, what is the sun doing? Rising. The sun rises up over the city. So do you see how I'm taking those little words or phrases that we've put into our chart and I'm making them into full sentences? You may need an adult's help, so that's okay. If you need to ask your grown-up to help you turn this into full sentences, that's okay. Today, I'd like you to try to do verse 1 and 2, maybe even 3, of your verse planner, putting them into verses on your first draft. Your first draft doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to work on a second draft and a third draft, so this is just the first of the writing process. Okay, now you need to go back and do this planner. Once you're done, you can go write your first draft where you take all of those verse planners and you turn them into full sentences. Don't forget, if you're feeling stuck, ask a grown-up for help. You can do this, poet. I can't wait to see your writing and your amazing poetry about the sun. I'll see you next time. Bye, poets.